All right, welcome everybody. This talk is going to be about the things we're doing to make CanJS thrive within a constantly changing technology landscape. While its focus is on CanJS, I think there's a lot of things here that can apply to any application development environment. This is largely about things that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I try to assemble these ideas into one presentation, but it's a little bit ad hoc, but please indulge me. So before I get into the things that we're doing, it's important to understand the environment CanJS finds itself in. So CanJS is kind of in between a rock and a hard place. But to know how to move, you have to know exactly where you are. And I think success for us is going to be about being able to find and exploit cracks, to go places others won't be able to go, and to try new things without suffering the costs. And just like an invasive species, you have to be willing to do something different, to prioritize one thing over another. And if you look at the priorities of typical open source projects, I think this is how they line up, generally speaking. Most will focus on ease of use as the most important concern. This makes a lot of sense because you need people to adapt your technology, and most people, by nature, aren't going to be skilled with it when they begin. And also, I think that there's a long tail of developers out there. There's fewer people who are extremely skilled than there are people who are just getting into technology. Then the next most important thing is innovation, because once you have a decent user base, well, you need to be able to innovate if you're going to stay relevant. I actually think that's something very hard to do for most community-driven projects over time, because people are fickle and they will leave and go on to the new hotness very quickly. And then the final thing is code stability. I think every open source maintainer cares about code stability. It's just they will subvert that for ease of use and innovation and changes readily. So what we are having to do, I think, or what we're going to do, and what CanJS is going to give up, is ease of use. We're going to flip our priorities compared to most open source projects. Ease of use is still going to be important to us, but we're going to try to prioritize code stability over everything else. And what I mean by code stability is that your code should stay as valuable as long as possible. We want to make it so if you write a piece of CanJS code, you are not going to have to go back and change it unless the use case changes. My hope is that this is something that developers who end up using CanJS for a long time will come to appreciate. We're valuing the long-term usefulness and user experience of CanJS over the initial user experience, which means we're kind of focusing on the higher-end developers or the people who are doing maintenance. I'm not sure this strategy will work. There's a lot of people who think that it's crazy, but I'm personally excited by it because it means that really we're aligning CanJS's goals to something that I have found that I guess I personally care about a lot, are really the first two, innovation and stability. I like the idea of being able to write code and have it last for a very long time, and I want to be able to try new things and with the framework to adapt other ideas. So those two as our first two priorities makes a lot of sense to me.
And Justin, I think maybe people take issue with saying we're going to make CanJS like less easy to use, or it's not going to be as easy to use, because it's just a focus on like easy to use over the long term, and not like the magic of when you first get something set up and it's all magically working. That a lot of projects that do that make it more difficult to maintain that and make changes in the long run. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I guess I should say that these things are very important, and ease of use is extremely important, but it will not supersede code stability. If all things are equal, we'll favor code stability over ease of use. I think a good example for this is the fact that we use packages everywhere, and that's well, we encourage people to use these independent packages. That is, of course, not as easy to use out of the box as just one big CAN library. But packages are essential and fundamental to our theories on how to provide code stability and innovation. So that means that instead of making people use one big package for CanJS, which would be easier, it loses compared to our higher priority code stability and innovation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as a good example of what you mean there.
Yeah, I should say that it's extremely important to us to make ease of use, make it easy to use wherever we can, but it will not supersede these other things.
Sure. And just FYI, I don't know if you're intending to share your screen yet or not, but you aren't right now.
I'm not sharing my screen this whole time. I haven't been sharing my screen.
Not yet. Okay,
so that was should have been sharing it this whole time. Okay. No. All right. Why isn't it sharing? You can see my face? Okay, now I've stopped sharing my screen and you can see my face. Hey everybody. Oh, so the jokes didn't even land.
It seemed like you were just talking about the topics, which is why I wasn't sure if you meant to share your screen. You're still not sharing it yet. It's still.
I know, but I'm debating whether I should start over again or not. No. I don't want to waste everybody's time here, but I did want to make this that it was like something I could publish and not have to do a bunch of editing. Oh well. So this was the rock in a hard place that nobody laughed at, and I was wondering why. Okay. And that was my flipping it around. Well, hopefully everybody understood what I was talking about, but yes, this is what I was talking about. These are the priorities most open source projects use, and then we're flipping it around to be these. So I'll just start from here and I'll re-edit the intro.
And just FYI, the animations don't really come through, so I don't feel like you lost a lot there.
All right. I should have just recorded it. Oh, well, here we go. So now I want to talk about what the, so that's what we have in mind. Talk about the tactics that we're going to use to accomplish those priorities and those goals. And some of them people are already familiar with here, but I'm going to go through them all again. First thing is we're putting everything into its own repository and individual package. The next thing is we're moving stateful side effects. We're moving side effects from all of our mixins or our plugins. We are going to harden our stateful packages because those are the APIs that are most likely to, changes in those APIs are the most likely to break stability. We want to make our stuff as useful to as many other people and use cases as possible, and then we want to get contributions any way we can. So independent packages repositories. CanJS now has about 48 different packages and repositories across its 4 different collections. While a lot of other libraries and frameworks release themselves in multiple packages, it's really the multiple repositories that matters more. And I'm not actually sure how many other big open source projects do it this way. The repositories is more important than the packages because repositories allow you to develop asynchronously different parts of the entire framework. So if CanEJS, there's not a lot of work going on there, that's fine. We don't need to make a release for that when we're releasing the rest of CanJS or other parts of CanJS. But what this really matters, I think, the most to is our end users. Anybody who's is upgrading between 2.3 and 3.0 can see it is kind of a difficult thing to do. But the amount of code changes in CanJS 3.0 that were for breaking changes are actually really small compared to the amount of fixes we did and the amount of new features we added. But if you look at the size of that step, well, most of the reason why it looks hard to upgrade is really those breaking changes. So the breaking changes are like the impact of them far outweighs the amount of code, right? It's the ratio of code to impact is huge for breaking changes. So by splitting everything up into independent packages and repositories, we can create for our users a much smoother gradients of updates. And I think, especially since it's mostly people watching at Bitovi, hopefully you felt how fast we can get new releases out the door. A lot of times people have been coming to us with bugs, and we'll have a new package out that day for like CanStash or CanCompute. And then when everything, we can later regression test everything against each other and release a full CanJS release that's verified to everything works together. This allows us to be much quicker at releases, but it also allows the projects or the applications to pick and choose what they want. If they want, some Can Event 3.10, some new feature with Can Event, but they don't want Can Route right away, well, then they can do that. We don't have to release a 4.0 and then people have to swallow bug fixes and new features but they don't have to absorb breaking changes for bug fixes and new features. Of course, managing this can be very difficult. This is why we have the Dun.js plugin generator, which makes it easy to bootstrap a new repository that fits in with the CanJS, how CanJS plugins are supposed to be built. It includes automated tests and continuous integration setup with Travis CI, includes the ability to publish global AMD and CommonJS builds, and also just do a publish so that your distributables are checked in and things like that. And it sounds like videos aren't really working, and hopefully everybody here is familiar with what this looks like. I'm not going to go through these nice videos that Chasen made, and I'll put this up later, but yes, you can very easily set up a new repository to house your plugin. Some other things that we're doing for CanJS. So CanJS itself now represents the integration tests for all the different packages in the CanJS project. So what we do as an open source team is we release new versions of individual packages when their individual tests are passing. But hopefully on a frequent basis, or maybe we'll just do this like every month or every other month, we will run our integration test suite to make sure that everything works together in every single browser. That also gives people a kind of target version of CanJS. So if you want to say, I'm using CanJS 3.5, then you can hard code your packages to match what packages are included in CanJS 3.5. And that gives people kind of a basis for understanding, while still allowing the flexibility that we talked about. We're also using Greenkeeper to know when any sub packages have changed and automatically run the so if, let's say, CanStash depends on CanUtil and depends on CanRoutes or something like that, which it really doesn't, I guess. But if CanUtil changes, which is used by everything, what Greenkeeper does is reruns all of our other packages tests with the new version of CanUtil and lets us know if we've broken anything. This is pretty much a necessity if you're building things in different repos the way we are. The next thing that we want to do is remove side-effectual mixins. And to understand why, we'll have to take it back to understanding that the dream for CanJS is that code stability, that you write code, and as long as that code gets the dependencies it cares about, it should never change. No other code should be able to impact another module directly. And what we realized is, just having everything in its own package isn't enough to make sure things are stable, because we were violating this what you see is what you get principle in a whole host of different behaviors or modules inside CanJS. What is a module that creates side effects? Well, that's when you import one module. So let's say here I'm using I'm using define map, and I'm using something like the old legacy can validate behavior. Here, by loading can validate legacy, it adds a errors method to the prototype of all define maps. But this affects all other maps in the entire application. So user imports can define map, and just because task loaded can define map, then suddenly it has an errors method. This is not good design. And so much of 2.3 was written this way. The define plugin, the list promise plugin, backup plugin, validate plugin, pretty much everything we wrote created side effects. And this is bad, again, because user.js could never load some other plugin that maybe had its own errors method. We want this, what you see is what you get. That's a kind of a mantra in 3.0 going forward. So one thing that we're doing is making it so all of our kind of mixins work as actual mixins to the specific modules that are being created, or to specific entities that are being created within a module. So here is an example of it being used. I have define map, and I load the define validate mixin. I define my task type, and then I call the define validate mixin and pass it the type, and that adds the errors method. The good thing about this, of course, is that nothing else is affected. So user would not have an errors method, which is good. Again, though I would say this is a circumstance where perhaps ease of use is taking a back seat towards stability, because maybe some people just want to be able to import all of their things and have them present every module, but that's just not how things are going to work going forward. The nice thing about this is hopefully when ES decorators land, these kind of mixins will be very pleasant to work with. Here's how you could add a define validate behavior to a define map. I think, well, syntactically it has to be, actually, now that I think about it, a little bit different. But this kind of thing will work as we move to more class-based constructor functions. So we've started working on a few of these side effect-free mixins. Can define validate JS is built this way. I've got a version of can define stream Kefir that isn't published that works this way. Can connect is built this way from the beginning. And can define backup, I've got a version of that isn't published that's being worked on. So this is how all mixins should be written going forward in CanJS. One other thing is we have the ability to do mix-in. We already kind of have and are starting to put in place the ability to do mix-ins on kind of the view module, normal JavaScript module arena. But where we don't have that yet, and what we'll need to do also is make this work in templates. So templates, CanJS templates have this ability to listen to a click event and then run some code. That's become standard, right? But what you can do is you can load mixins to CanJS's event system, and then you could listen to an enter event. And then when the user hits enter, you could run the do something code. Now this is bad, again, because this enter event now is available in every other template, whether this template imported it or not. And if you wanted some other enter event, well, you're out of luck. You'd be overwriting each other and things would just break. So we need some ways of fixing this. There's a way that could work pretty much immediately, which is you could import your can enter module, and maybe it gives you an on and off method, and then you could wire that up yourself when the element is inserted. Actually, that would have to be inserted and removed. This actually code wouldn't even work. But you could do something terrible like that. Another idea is we support everything that a template can really operate on. Somehow you can interface with it. Another idea is you can pass in your module, and that would be have some kind of API to do bindings that the template would see, and that way you could do custom events, and it would be mixed in within the view layer. So other things this is something else that we'll probably start working towards eventually. So we can start removing the modules that create side effectual behavior. But there are some modules that have state themselves that you really, that's impossible to do. Right? There's some modules in CanJS that more or less you can't remove their statefulness. And because these modules, any changes to them would basically mean you can never have more than one of these modules within CanJS, which means that any changes to them basically breaks compatibility for everything else. We need to make sure that these are the most hardened packages inside CanJS. So let me give an example of one of these. So a stateful module is something like CanView callbacks, because it has state. That tags variable is state, and it exports a tag method that lets you mutate that state and read that state. So let's try to understand why any changes here or new versions of CanView callbacks can create some serious problems. And we'll talk about a few ways we could address them. So how it can cause problems is, let's say we have a can component that's going to use can component 3.0, and can component 3.0 uses CanView callbacks 3.0. Well, here's one component, and what we want is code stability, which means, hey, we can have this brand new component written in can component 4.0 alongside our 3.0, and they'll just work together all fine and dandy. But can component 4.0 might depend on a different version of CanView callbacks. So the implementation of can component 3 and can component 4 might look like this. Can component 3 might require CanView callbacks 3 and then call view callbacks tag, where can component 4 needs view callbacks 4 and calls view callbacks element. So the API has changed. Well, the problem here is that you can't have in a CanJS application two versions of CanView callbacks with independent state, because there can only be one registry for custom elements if we want custom elements to work together. So we have to make sure that CanView callbacks and things that are stateful change almost never. So the first step is, of course, identifying these things. Currently, I think we only have, we really have three main stateful areas, maybe a fourth: CanCID, CanObservation, CanView callbacks. The ones on the bottom two I'm going to talk about, they're stateful in kind of less frameworky ways, and can namespace is actually a way we deal with stateful packages that I'll talk about. But these are essentially our stateful packages that we need to make sure that the APIs are as stable and less likely to change. So this is something that we're going to have to focus on a lot to make sure that if we do release a CanJS 4.0, or that these things will, hopefully be the last versions of these that we have to make. So how to deal with these stateful packages that there can be only one of? Well, the first way we deal with is actually making another stateful package, which is can namespace, which actually looks like this. In CanJS 3.0, there's a can namespace that just exports an empty object, and that's all the package ever does. And with such simple code, hopefully we should never release a new version of can namespace. What all other stateful modules do, so like CanCID, is they, oh, I forgot to actually, there's a little bug here. Hold on. This is supposed to be importing can namespace. What all other stateful packages do, is such as CanCID, is they import that namespace module, and then they check if something has already been defined on it, because you can't have more than 1, 2 CIDs, and if there is, it throws an error. So if you see these kind of warnings in your application, you know what to look for. It means, hey, you've got two packages probably that are importing different versions of some sub package. You need to figure out how to make it so that there's only one ever being loaded. And the good thing is, because we'll never release a new version of can namespace, hopefully that means it will only ever be loaded once. So we should get pretty good warnings out of it. Another way of avoiding stateful modules is to do it the kind of Handlebars way. I don't know if people have seen how, if you're using Handlebars, you can kind of create a new context, because Handlebars, if you think about it, when you register a helper in Handlebars, that's registering a global helper really for all of Handlebars. But you can create new contexts, and then you can pass that Handlebars context around. We could do something similar with like maybe CanView callbacks. Maybe it's a constructor function, and then everywhere that you might need to interface with what is formerly a singleton, you would have to pass around a view callbacks. So in the first file, I create an instance of view callbacks. In the second file, you might have to say, hey, view callbacks, this my one instance for my whole application. I'm registering you. I'm registering this component in you, and in anytime you render a template, which happens in app.js, you've got to make sure it has the view callbacks. Hopefully, you feel like this is a case where stability isn't worth the worst user experience. And to kind of what Chasen was talking about at the beginning, there are places where I think that usability, of course, wins. And this, to me, would be one of those circumstances. We're not going to force a user to pass around their own view callbacks everywhere, on the off chance that they might want to have two different versions of it. Because in reality, the user should only have one version anyways. So we'll just own that responsibility for the user. So the next thing we need to do is make our stuff as usable as possible. This helps innovation because you can make a whole lot with, if you've got a bucket, a rope, and a knife. I've watched a lot of Naked and Afraid, and I know what you can do with these things. It's pretty impressive. So we want to make our stuff directly useful in other projects. We want to make it so it works with other libraries, and make it so it's just useful in as many workflows as possible. So some stuff I think that we have directly useful, and you might be noticing by now my my status emojis. If it's a big smiley face, it means it's like totally ready and it's great. If it's upside down, it means it could use a little bit more polish till it's super useful to people outside of, you know, just the CanJS community. Ghost means it's kind of not anywhere quite yet, but maybe it's being worked on a little bit, but it's not really ready for anybody to use. And nerd glasses means it's ready if you're building something kind of like you can build things on top of it. You probably wouldn't use it yourself within another, you know, another type of project. So we've got a few things. Like I think CanFixture, everybody likes. Any project can use that. Angular, React, whatever. CanConnect was designed to also be similarly useful, but it needs bindings to other. Well, it needs to, I think still CanConnect needs to be polished. Same with CanSet, but then it also needs bindings to other frameworks to make it as useful to those frameworks as it would be to CanJS. Things like CanEvent, it's an event emitter. I think we should make it comply with node-style event emitters. CanEvent also goes a little bit beyond because its events can be batched and can be made asynchronous. So there's a lot of things it can do that make it very useful. It might be a nerd, might need a nerd emoji as well. We've started taking on making it so we have a version of Can component that produces native custom elements. CanUtil is great for nerds. I've been working on a parsing so that we can just have a generic parsing library used to, you know, handle kind of what's the word for when you have a little mini API, that kind of stuff. Parse HTML, that kind of world. Observables obviously are really useful and can be useful to a lot of other things. And we have CanFixture Socket, which works just like CanFixture, but simulates Socket IO in that way. We're also working on making, we've got bridges to others. Some of that I think we need to now upgrade to 3.0. That's why the smiley face upside down means it's there, but it needs like work to bring it to what CanJS, you know, to CanJS 3.0 world. But we should build bridges, as many bridges to other technologies as we can. CanConnect Feathers is ready. That works great. CanStream Kefir, I just haven't released it. Validate.js, I think that's out. Juan, if he's watching, can correct me if I think it's published. It's just not part of CanJS 3.5. And then the things that we already built for 2.3, we should upgrade them to 3.0. Bitstrap, BitC3, Semantic UI CanJS, which that one might actually be. Marshall is on here, can let me know. And then React View Model is also being worked on as we speak. I think it's published, but that's also a way to merge our define maps with JSX and React. So the problem with all of making these integrations is, well, it's hard to do. It's hard to make it so we work with everything and everything can work with us. And a lot of that reason is if you take a look at something like this in CanJS, this you know, just a stash template that was reading message and keeping that up to date. In 2.3, the types that really could be available to this template were mostly maps, just normal objects, and computes. So in 2.3, we had code that would just read to read a property would just, check if it's a map. If it isn't, read it as an object, check if there's compute there, and read the compute. It's because 2.3, we made the assumption that we knew everything. I guess like the whole world was encapsulated within 2.3. There things could be maps or computes or objects, and that was it. But with 3.0, we're starting to get a lot of other types. There's can define and its maps. There's can map, simple map, computes, promises, streams, and probably will be a whole bunch more and different varieties of these things. So we need to be able to integrate with those types, with things like our computes need to be able to integrate them. Our templates need to be able to integrate with them. So how to make the best integration system? There's a few different ways. The first is where we could learn from symbols. I think it's part of ES6 or I think it's ES6. ES6 has symbols. These are a way for you to make your types integrate with JavaScript. So if I want to integrate with the for of loops, I can create an iterator symbol and integrate with JavaScript's for of. So one approach that I think we will take will be to use iterators where possible. So here I could import a can symbol package, and that will have an iterator on it that will be the same value as if there is an ES equivalent iterator symbol, it will be that. And here I can define how you would iterate through a define list. So this will work great for symbols that are supported by ES, by ECMAScript, and it'll also work well when the types want to integrate nicely and can be easily integrated with our symbol system and our version of CanJS and CanJS. But some might not be able to. So we might not be able to get to every instance of a Kefir stream and make sure that it has symbols created on it. So we need some way of telling our things that are going to do like operations or loops and things like that, how to do that on a Kefir type or something like that. So another, in conjunction with can symbol, we'll probably need a can operate and allow people, and this is of course another stateful module, but it will allow people to overwrite the behavior to teach, if you will, CanJS how to work with different types. So here I've loaded can operate, and I'm telling there's a can operate observe value potentially that we can instruct, give it to kind of duck type some Kefir type object, and then to wire things up so that we know when this value changes. And then we currently have can types, which is similar to all this, but I think it would be replaced largely by symbol and operate. But this is this currently allows you to say, hey, if you had a different promise type, you want to use Q promises and make them work in Stash or anywhere else that CanJS works with promises, you can use this. You can import can types and change the isPromise method to return true when it's past a Q promise. So the final thing we need to do is make sure we're getting contributions from people. And there's a lot of obvious things that we're going to be doing, such as like we're going to start trying to do better inline coding of our code with bring back some more Daco. We're gonna try to do trainings on how like the things work. Bring back that kind of stuff. Training videos. But I really want to touch upon the things that I think at least Bitovi is doing unique. The first is we're trying to have this ecosystem collection that is, well, I think, stepping back, I think there was a big problem with jQuery in that its plugin ecosystem was just so the Wild West that you really never knew what you were getting. And I want to have an ecosystem collection that is, people can still, of course, publish their things to NPM and tag them CanJS. But I'd like to have an ecosystem that has a higher degree of quality assurance on each of the packages that's contained within it. So that people know, hey, these are tested to run in all the same browsers. They're documented in the same way. They're just of a certain level of quality. I think that can help. Yes, it puts up a little bit of a burden for contributions, but the fact that it can be part of and within this ecosystem and get so high of visibility within that, I think is also attractive. So yeah, my hope is that the individual plugins that make it within the ecosystem will see a much higher adoption rate than if we just had a kind of a generic, open registry for anything CanJS. I still think that can exist and should exist, but I do want this. I do like this ecosystem because it does the integration tests and things like that. You should count on these things working. And the next thing that I think that we do that's special, and everybody at Bitovi knows this, but there might be people not watching at Bitovi because this is a live stream, is I've long been obsessed with how to encourage people to share code. Not just in terms of open source, but just within a company, within any kind of organization. There's so many benefits to not having to write the same thing over and over again. I used to work at Accenture, and they would always brag that they wrote more code than IBM and Microsoft and Apple combined. And I was like, that is nothing to brag about. If Accenture, a company especially the size of Accenture, could figure out ways of making it so that people were encouraged to share code, I just got to imagine how many millions and millions of dollars could be saved. Even for us at some of our clients, we've built reporting software, kind of generic reporting software that we were able to bring to other parts of the organization and save tremendous amounts of development time. But it's a lot to ask of people to build something and then somehow spread the word about it, to somehow get people's attention before they start writing it themselves, that they can find your thing and use it and learn it and use it effectively. Very, very hard to do. So we have Bitcentive within Bitovi to try to encourage that, right? We open source all of our stuff, so we're also encouraging open source. But what we do is we essentially take a small, we impose a small tax on all of our application development, on all of our client projects, and then we pool all of that into different open source projects, and then out from that, we basically pay a royalty to the largest contributors for these projects on kind of a monthly basis. So I don't know if this is going to be be a big game changer for Bitovi, but it's something that I've always felt is a huge problem, that if people could just cooperate better and were encouraged to do so, that a lot of time and energy could be saved. And this is one approach to trying to put a program within one company of making that actually happen. So that's it. That's kind of the big roadmap for CanJS currently. It has much less to do with any specific features. It has very much to do with what we're trying to accomplish. We want a lot of innovation. We want it to be easy to use, but the most important thing for right now is code stability, getting that right, so that people can our end users can have that nice smooth gradient of improvements, and that long-term usability of CanJS is really good. And the ways we're doing it, again, we're putting everything in its own package. We're removing side effects from any plugins. We're trying to focus on those stateful packages that they're really breaking changes, break stability, trying to make our stuff as useful as possible. Especially, I like making those low-level things useful so people can innovate very easily from that. And then we just want to make ourselves open to contributions and encouraging them any way we can. So that's it. Are there any questions? Are people still there? Let's see. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, we're still here.
All here.
Cool. Any thoughts on this? All right. Well, I will stop the broadcast in case there are any that don't want to be public. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will undoubtedly create a more polished version of this and publish that later. So see y'all.